let us know your name and where you're from if you haven't already done so. It's nice to get a sense of who's on the call today, and I want to thank you all for joining us. As I mentioned, we have muted all the lines because the number of people on these calls, it helps reduce background noise. So if you can't hear yourself or we're not hearing you, it's quite by design. So we really welcome you to pop your questions in the chat box. And when it comes to question time, we'll invite you to put up your hand and we'll unmute your line if you prefer to talk. If you're not sure how to put up your hand, you'll notice in that little circle on the image I've got in this slide here on the bottom right-hand side, so just above the chat box, there's a little hand icon. If you click that, the hand will show up beside your name, and I'll be watching for those when we're in our question period later on today. Alternatively, you're more than welcome to pop your questions in the chat box, and we'll also be pulling them out of there for our speakers today. As I mentioned, the session is being recorded. The recording and the slides will be shared. We'll send them out to you via email within 2 days of the session, and we'll also be posting them on both the Council and the FNHA website, and I'll be posting that location throughout the duration of today's webinar. If you choose to remain anonymous, there's no need to type your question. You can log into the webinar anonymously, so you don't need to identify yourself with a name if you have any questions. As I mentioned, the link to the recording of the slides will be distributed by email. I'll be popping it up in the chat box today just to remind people that that will be coming out, so you'll be able to access all of this information in perpetuity. So you're getting recorded, Carol, Dina, and Michelle. For those people who are on Twitter today, we got quite the brouhaha happening after the last webinar. We had a lot of impressions from the webinar series. We will be on Twitter again today, really sharing the messages that we're hearing throughout the world. So we welcome everyone who is on Twitter to join us there today. So we'll be using the hashtags that starts with me and cultural humility, and also the Twitter handle Fraser Health. Now, I really want to emphasize that we are touching on sensitive subject matter. There may be stories and experiences that we go through that may trigger people. We really want to ensure that you've prepared a support system for yourself in advance in which you have easy access to, and this could be an elder, a trusted mentor, a family member, a friend. We also have provided a crisis contact number, so if you need support, please don't hesitate to call the toll-free crisis line here in the province of BC, and that number is on your screen right now. It's with pleasure now that I would like to introduce our elder. So as we get going, it's always nice to ground our session in the place we're at. And it's with pleasure I get to introduce Virginia Peters. Virginia, or Ginny, is an elder born to William and Nancy Phillips from Chehalis, BC. Her immediate family consists of 3 daughters, 2 sons, 11 grandchildren, 6 foster grandchildren, and 11 great-grandchildren. She has a large extended family, definitely over 1,500. Her family is very close-knit and is strongly linked with the extended family. Her experience is varied in terms of professionally, and today in her life, she's a community and family-oriented person. Ginny continues to dedicate much time and effort to assist in community development and healing. She firmly believes that culture and spirituality is key to healing and rebuilding the strength of our families and communities. So it's with pleasure I will hand it over to Ginny now to do our opening prayer. Thank you, Ginny.
Thank you. I thought I would start with a prayer song. It's something that is really special to me. One of the things that we lost was our ability to talk our language. And it's not an easy language to learn. But one way I'm able to learn it is by singing it. So I will say the thank you, Creator. It's to a drum beat. I don't have a drum with me, but you can just use your imagination. Oh, 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 Quizai, Chichosia, was Dr. Mookstan, Quizai, Equala Muhmestiu, Quizai, to well Lita Chichalisa Quizai Melis Castus on display. Thank you, Creator. Thank you for all things that you give to us. Thank you, Creator, for all of those who are gathered together today. Thank you, Creator, for our ancestors, the ones who were here before us and showed us the way and are now saints in heaven. Thank you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So that's the Halkamilam language for the Stala people. So I was able to get those words through my mother, who taught the language in our community school in Steelis. So, and the tune came to me through a spiritual burning that we're having at Hatem, that sacred place over at Hatzig. So, these are some of the things that we get blessed with. And I'm so happy to have been blessed with that tune and with the words of verified by my mother. And this happened just before she went to the other side, so it's really special to me. So I can see, there's a lot of people out there now listening to this, and so our hands go up to you, who are participating in this, and I know that while we were singing that, all of your ancestors came down upon you as well, my relations.
Thank you so much, Ginny. It was an amazing start to our time together, and I think you really provide that grounding. Thank you for joining us, and we'll touch base with you shortly as we go through today's session. So with that, to begin our day together, our time together, is with pleasure I would like to introduce our three speakers. Dina Lambright is originally from Kamloops, which is where I am. She's a Métis and currently living in White Rock, BC with her amazing 19-year-old son. She's worked for Fraser Health for over 8 years as the Aboriginal Health Lead covering Fraser North and South. Prior to Fraser Health, Dina worked for 8 years with a nonprofit agency managing 5 domestic violence programs. Dina also instructs an Aboriginal history course at Stenberg College for the Community Mental Health and Addictions Worker Program, and it's amazing to have her join us here today. I would also like to introduce Carol Peters. Carol is a Stola woman from Chuela First Nation. She has been with Fraser Health for 16 years as a acute care social worker and as an Aboriginal Health Liaison. Carol has a passionate interest in supporting Aboriginal patients and their families to receive culturally safe care. Along with a clinical nurse educator, Carol currently facilitates Fraser Health's Indigenous Cultural Safety Circle session and has been responsible for the training of over 200 public health care providers, which is just amazing, and I'm so looking forward to hearing the words. And we also have Vishal Jain. So it's with pleasure to introduce Vishal, who is graduated from Carleton University in Ottawa, Ontario, with a degree in human rights. He's vigorously and passionately pursued work around poverty, racism, ethnocentrism, colonialism, and sexism. While completing his master's of public health, he began working with Fraser Health Authority and the Aboriginal Health Team to advance culturally safe and anti-racism organizational initiatives. Michelle now serves as the coordinator of Aboriginal Health Initiatives at Fraser Health Authority. So please join me in a warm welcome to Dina, Carol, and Michelle. We are so thrilled to have you today, and I will hand the ball over to you to advance the slides.
Terrific. Okay. Thanks, Colleen, for that introduction. And I'd like to begin by thanking both the First Nations Health Authority and the BC Patient Safety and Quality Council for organizing this platform and bringing us all together, and for giving us the opportunity to share the post-Indigenous cultural safety debrief circles. I'd also like to thank Colleen for her creative partnership as we've organized some of our thoughts here today. So I'd like to start by asking a few questions for us to reflect on throughout the presentation. How best can we understand the notion of culture when it is so deeply entangled within complex networks of historic, social, economic, and political processes? What does culturally safe healthcare mean when situated within this much complexity? And how can we make our institutions and systems proactively work for all the people, Indigenous and settlers alike, who interact with them? These are just some of the questions that we are continuously asking ourselves when designing culturally safe initiatives. Culturally safe healthcare doesn't just mean recognizing the uniqueness of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people as cultural groups, but it is also about identifying the impact of the dominant culture, including its institutions and norms, on Indigenous peoples. It is about locating practical strategies to address tendencies to create cultural harm. It is about deploying these strategies to counter environments that foster a lack of safety for people who feel misunderstood, discriminated, or disempowered. Lastly, it is about engaging in transformative change movements to shape policies and systems, as well as the representatives of these systems for the better. And therein lies its potential for reconciliation. Now, like any movement, Fraser Health's cultural safety movement has some challenges that require further consideration as well. A challenge underpinning all the cultural safety work that we do at Fraser Health is the inherent difficulty in creating significant and meaningful change in large-scale organizations. These organizations are efficient and effective because they are not easily susceptible to change. They are based on routine modes of operation, standardized practice, and the establishment of policies and protocol. And yet that is the journey that we are all on. To construct a change management process that defies a central paradox. What happens when an immovable object, like large-scale institutions, meets an unstoppable force, like the cultural safety movement? This is what brings us together, to take up this challenge. Fortunately, we have leaders like the two people who I'm sharing this space with, who have accepted this challenge and have been leading the way forward. They and other leaders like them have been holding up a mirror to the healthcare system for a long time. So we may better take a look at our practice so we can see more clearly the culture of healthcare and how best to make this culture safe for everyone. And so with that, I'd like to pass it on to Dina Lambright and Carol Peters to talk about their experiences holding up this mirror to unearth bias and to give expression to the word reconciliation.
Thank you, Vishal. Thank you, Vishal. I want to point out that Vishal will be available, even though you can't see him, he'll be available for questions should you have any towards the question and answer section. So we're going to move through some slides that I hope everybody can follow along with. And we're not going to read from anything, so we're just kind of winging it this morning. So hopefully folks can follow along with us, and feel free to jump in if you have any questions throughout the whole session. Carol and I are going to tag team for the rest of the PowerPoint information. So if everybody can see the first slide, back in 2008, there was an initiative to address some of the outcomes from ICS training that had been implemented within Fraser Health. And folks were running into some challenges after taking the training, and they approached our CNE, Wendy Bruins, back then, and she approached the Aboriginal leads. And we took it upon ourselves to create a facilitated dialogue within Fraser Health and offer some training to the public health staff that were experiencing some emotionally charged reactions since taking it. And initially we had 8 sessions that were offered in 2011, and it was our first go-round. We approached PHSA to help with creating the sessions, and from there we kind of made it our own. We tried to keep the space traditional. We tried to keep the space honoring of all of our people, and we tried to give staff a safe space. The circle sessions, as you can see, they were launched in 2011. We started offering them in the North and South region. We brought Dwayne Howard on board with myself and Carol Peters and Brian Muth, and our CNEs were running the sessions. And since then, they have taken on a life of their own, and hundreds of people in the last 6 years have taken the sessions and speak quite highly of them. We'll run through some slides that speak to this. We're going to talk about, I know that we mentioned the word challenges a few times. We're definitely going to talk about some of the challenges that we faced in these sessions. We're also going to talk a little bit about our successes. One of the things when we're talking about some of the challenges throughout the work that we do is throughout it all we maintain a sense of humor. And I think that our people are certainly akin to that, and that's what keeps us moving forward. So I'm going to pass it off to Carol, and hopefully she's in your slide, and we will move through the slides, and we're going to talk a little bit about what happens in the talking circle and who attends them, what are some of the traditional things that we do in the session, and what are some of the outcomes and the processes that we do in these sessions.
Okay. I have been running the circle since 2008. Actually was a part of the PHSA setting up the Indigenous Cultural Safety Program, so I got to be at the very beginning in the roundtable discussions. So one of the really important things about the circle is that we had to have people that have done the training and an understanding of what it is that's involved in it. One of the biggest issues was that it is time, and many of the people who had taken the training had no one that they could talk to and bounce information off of or vent or whatever it is they had to do. So when we discussed having the circle, primarily we've done them with public health workers who have had no idea what a talking circle is about. And so one of the most important things was talking about the personal impact in such a way as how has the training affected you as a person who's taken the Indigenous Cultural Safety Training. Wanting to also know, okay, so it's affected you on a personal level. How has that been? And how has it affected you on a professional level? We talk about being inclusive. Everybody who's in the circle is there for themselves, but they're also there for each other, because what they're doing is they're not only talking about how things have affected, but what they may have said could trigger someone else to remember, oh, and this happened or that happened. So we're making sure that everybody's involved. Those who are there are listening to each other. They're helping each other to take some of that maybe anger, pain, bitterness, grief, sadness, shame, helping to take some of that away. There's respect in the circle. The person who holds the item that we're using is the person who talks. There's no side talk, there's no gossiping, there's no texting, there's no checking your messages, because those are really, really detrimental to the circle, and especially no crosstalk. So I'm not going to about what's going on. That respect is for that person who's talking. We use confidentiality is paramount. We need people to know that what's said in the circle stays in the circle. Some of the things that come out of it may be over and over themes, so we will take those and we'll address them later on. We want to keep the energy going. We want to keep the flow. I guess one of the things that I'm really strong on is that we have such a diverse population in Fraser Health that many people, we don't all pray together. And so our circles, they either start with a prayer or a song. So I like to start with the songs. And the reason I do that is because it helps to draw people in, just much as what Ginny did, thank you, Ginny, is you draw people in and you set the tone for the circle. We do talk about ground rules, and therein lies one of our challenges. So with the circle, there's some very strict protocol around the circle. So one is, when you're in the circle, either you can hold the eagle feather, you can hold a talking stick, or a rock. We did use initially, for my sessions, we used the eagle feather, and we're taught that there are some rules around the eagle feather, one being that if a woman is on her moon time, that she pass the feather, like not touch it, but have the next person beside her. That was a challenge for many of the staff who were taking the circles. And it also set up some angst with me, because that was how I was taught to run them. So we did have to improvise, and happily people are very receptive to using a talking stick, or in my case I use a rock. And the reason we use that is because the rock is generations, and there is so much connectedness because we all live on this earth. At the end of the circle, we actually do the circle in two parts. The first part is to talk about how has the training affected you on a personal level, so emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally. And there has been a lot of talk in this session because much of what people had heard, they've had to hold in. So this gives them many times the first opportunity to talk about what they actually thought about, what they'd learned and what they'd felt and what they'd gone through. And some people really did feel traumatized. Some felt so much shame and so much guilt. And we let them know it's not theirs to carry, but it's something that we really appreciate them being able to express it and to tell us and to talk amongst themselves, because in expressing it, they're able to let some of that go and to open their eyes to what they can do. So once we're finished, then many times, like I will gauge the people that we're with. Every group is different. They all have their own dynamics. And I'll summarize what it is that the group has been feeling, some of the main topics, and then we'll go on to the second session, which is more discussion around how has it affected you on your work level. So how can we incorporate what we've learned into our jobs, and also our daily lives. We also want to encourage them to get to know their community members, who's out there, the Aboriginal agencies. That's much of that we discuss after the circle's over. The C&E will actually sit down and start talking about, okay, so what are some of the big questions that we have here? Many times it's something as simple as how do we ask a person if they're Aboriginal? Because many workers find that that's really difficult, and they don't want to put an Aboriginal person on the spot. So it can be a bit touchy for some people because they don't want to appear like they're discriminating, and they do want to be inclusive. So we do open up that space after the circle just to talk about, okay, what are some of those triggers? What are some of those things that we need to, as Aboriginal health, as public health employees, as acute care employees, mental health workers, what do we need to be able to do in order to work with Aboriginal people? So when we do have the open discussion, much of the times we talk about the PHSA training, and we recommend that they take the bystander to ally training so that when there are issues that come up, they can address them in a more comfortable way.
Bystander to ally is also a really good educational tool. A lot of the folks that participate in our circles, once they've been exposed to the 8 or 10 hours of online training, they tend to want more. So they come to our circles and they're either challenged emotionally with where do we go from here, and how do we become champions for our folks, and how can we get more training? A lot of them want to know, like, how can we get involved with our own communities? Whose land are we on? Whose territory are we on? Because we're such a small team, there's approximately 20 of us covering the entire region, so that's Burnaby to Hope. It's certainly important that we identify the champions within Fraser Health, being such a large body of employees. We do find those champions because fostering the trust in our communities is paramount to offering our services, and we will only provide champions and suggest champions within Fraser Health to our communities that we feel are safe for sure. So we're going to move to the third part of our circle and how we wrap up our circles from here.
So when we do the circles, there's a lot of intensity, there's a lot of emotion. The other times it's, we have people that are really quiet or who are answering without really feeling and thinking, but they're saying things that they think that they need to say, or they think that they should say. So one of the ways that we gauge how they're doing is we ask them to select one word that describes how they felt about this process. And we find that this really encourages them to start self-reflecting, like, okay, how am I feeling? What did I learn? Did I learn something? And it also allows them the opportunity to rebalance, to get balanced. I find that sometimes we have people in our circles that find it really difficult to talk, and getting a few words out of them might be difficult, but they are participating and they are thinking and they are feeling, and this is one way of them to be able to check in with the rest of the group. Many times the prime word is insight and understanding, compassion. Those are some of the things that they learn through doing this one exercise, and we find that it helps us as well for gauging whether the circle has, it's almost our way of evaluating the circle. Have these people gotten something out of the circle, and if so, what is it? And it also, I find, it brings the group up, because many of the times, like, they're really happy by the end of it. They may start off, like, really self-centered and worried, but by the end, they're all together. And I find that that's a really important part of the circle, is to complete that piece.
So some of our evaluations, and as we're closing up our sessions, a lot of the folks that are leaving our sessions, and we certainly don't let them, walk out the door feeling so emotionally charged. And I think that's why Carol does such a great job of really identifying where folks' emotional well-being is, because we hear predominantly a lot of folks sharing that they feel shame around being a Canadian. They feel emotionally upset, incredibly sad. And this is an 8 to 10 hour this historical breakdown of their training takes you from residential school, colonialism, residential school, Indian hospitals, and then cultural impact and where we are today. So it's hard to imagine for most of you out there to say, oh, 8 to 10 hours, how can we possibly cram all that in? So they're taking this very short training session, and then they're coming to our debrief sessions. And so we're trying to close out the circle. We're trying to identify where folks are needing a little more information because they're a little hungrier for it. And we're also trying to identify and create sort of a safe place where people can feel free to share their shame or their sadness and how they're feeling emotionally, for sure. So one of the things that we've been very successful in doing is annually handing out our evaluations after each circle session, and most of you can see pretty high stats around they're feeling much more supported. They have a clearer and more concise idea of what the course consists of, and they're a little bit more confident in their practice, which is really important in the work we do because we certainly face some challenges. So back to some of the feedback. Do you want to follow up outside the circle?
So one of the things when people ask for feedback, they are actually looking for, okay, what are other avenues that we can take? One of them would be the PHSC training. We try to have some web links. We try to let them know what information is out there. We give them handouts about cultural practices and protocols. The other one is that it's helped build empathy. So there are so many non-Aboriginal people who've never heard of residential schools, had never heard of Indian hospitals, but had only seen the native on the street kind of thing, the drunken Indian. They knew all the stereotypes and the stigmas, but had never really gotten to know anyone that was Aboriginal. So through taking this training, what they've told us is that they get to hear firsthand reports from people on how things were for them and how they survived. And they get to see that these people are surviving and they are resilient and they've been through extreme trauma and yet they're still able to cope. So they're more apt to want to work with them. So the other thing is also getting a little bit of an understanding about Aboriginal health isn't consistently medical. Aboriginal health is, we use whatever is out there, so our mental or emotional or spiritual or physical. We're using the water, we're using the trees, we're using the plants. And so understanding that if a person is deemed non-compliant doesn't necessarily mean that they're not trying to heal. It means that they may be using another avenue and may be more distrustful of the institutional systems, so the mental health, the acute care system, the public health system. So that might be a bit of an issue that they need to help to work through.
So again, some of the outside the circle feedback, very positive feedback that we've been able to share is different perspectives. You know, they have an open place to dialogue. Again, it's a safe place. It's the what you say here stays here. And we also open up a dialogue around, you know, the stereotyping, the stigma. What are some of the things that you have heard? And so that we can kind of demystify some of those stereotypes. And any question is a safe question in these circle groups, so we've certainly heard it all, that's for sure. So some of the concerns and challenges around our circles as they evolve and become entrenched in the work that we do. I'm going to pass to Carol to share a little bit about the concerns, and we'll kind of tag team adding.
Okay. So we talk about capacity and concerns. It's actually two sides. On one side, we have so many people wanting to take the debriefing sessions, but very few of us that are able to facilitate it. The other for public health is these nurses and staff get to take the training, but it is 10 to 14 hours worth of computer time, so somebody has to cover for them. And then in order to do the debriefing sessions, again, they need to be taking the time to come to wherever we're having the circle and being present in that circle. So again, it's the backfill that seems to be a bit of a drawback in some areas. Also places to host the training for the debriefing circle, because there aren't a lot of facilities that are rent-free that we can use to host these gatherings. And there's the situations where, are they central? How many people can get there? So we go with, okay, where are the majority of the participants coming from, and try to have it as central as possible for them. Backlash from management. So at one point, it was voluntary to take the training, and then it became mandatory to take the training. So we had some people that were really resistant to coming. And again, a safe place to talk about it. Like, I don't know why I'm taking this. I'm told I have to take it. Now I'm told I have to take it twice. So that can be a bit of a distress for some of the workers. And I think, Dina, you might have a little bit more on other management backlash.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of, it's a bit of a mandated training now to have this cultural safety, cultural protocol. We've opened up 500 spots now for staff to take the training. So should 500 people actually take the training, it isn't physically possible for us to run the equivalent amount of circles. So there's an imbalance there for sure. We run into you know, the corporate versus our traditional way of doing things. So our team tries to do everything as culturally traditional as we possibly can. You know, it's not always possible for our staff to get to our reserves to attend a circle, so we've had to run them out of health units. And I mean, we try to keep it as traditional as possible, but again, you know, one of the backlashes came around the use of a feather when a woman is on her moon, and so it was equivalent to public shaming, I guess, and so we weren't allowed to use a feather anymore. And
we were allowed to use the feather.
We couldn't publicly.
Yeah, so basically we have been told we are not allowed to ask any Fraser Health employee any personal questions, which makes no sense, because the first question we ask is, how has this training affected you personally? So that is one of the things, like, it's there. We deal as best we can, we do what we can, and we work around some of these situations.
Yeah, for sure.
I think another, just to back up a little bit, one of the other things that we had in the beginning was a concern about whether those of us who were involved in the circles and running the circles were qualified. And so that with Fraser Health and PHSA was a bit of a lively discussion. And so they did come and they met with us, and we did talk about, okay, what are we doing, how are we doing it, and we did reach an area of understanding that, yes, we are definitely qualified to run them. We have the training. I think I've been running them for about 25 years off and on. So we also have cultural training. We also have a lot of counseling training between each of us that run it, and we many times have somebody who is an elder or a cultural person that is able to attend as well. So those are our ways of trying to be as credible and as qualified as we can doing these sessions.
Mm-hmm. So some of the challenges, as Carol was talking about, was some of the people that have attended our sessions repeatedly say, we don't serve Aboriginal people, so I don't know why I need to take this training. I'm an administrator in Burnaby, for example. So some of the approaches we take are around your own personal biases and your own personal assumptions. Mm-hmm. So understanding your assumption that a person that you see is your bias of how you see an Aboriginal person. So we've been trying to dismantle sort of the idea of, just asking the question or never assuming that somebody isn't. And by understanding the historical trauma, that maybe you could take a little more compassionate role in your practice and how you deliver your practice, because most people that attend our circles, almost all of them assume that I am not Aboriginal. And so we kind of evolve it from there and breaking down people's assumptions for sure. So I'm not sure when we want to open it up to some questions. Our final slide is one that everyone is looking at, and that's around calling on our healthcare providers to reach out and find opportunities to actively engage with Aboriginal communities in your areas. Move towards an inquiry-based learning through community integration. There's lots of things going on in our communities. We have a huge urban population that has a lot of events and celebrations going on, not just on Aboriginal Day, but there's events throughout the year, whether it's longhouse season or fishing season, powwows, and they're going on all the time. You can jump online, FNHA or Fraser Health. We have some information around what's going on locally for sure, but because we're such a small team, we are asking service providers at large to take the initiative to become aware, become involved, become compassionate, and know the history and understand where people are coming from. And one of the most common phrases that we hear, I just heard it last week, was get over it. And we're tired of it. We're tired of hearing that phrase, and we want to move towards that reconciliation and dropping the biases, certainly around moving towards healthy and integrative approach to healthcare, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I tell everybody in the circles is that as Aboriginal people, we like to see who we're working with. We like to get to know them. And the more you're involved and the more you're seen as a helping or a healing practitioner, the better reception you're going to get from First Nations people. So get out there and be visible and volunteer and just get to know people.
And it's okay to say, where are you from? Mm-hmm. When we open up the dialogue around where are you from, our people know what that means. And if you ask either one of us where we're from, we would love to engage in a conversation about who our aunties are and where we're from and some of our traditions. And we've developed a new friend, and that can be in or out of the healthcare system. It's just, you know, the average person on the street. You know, it could be your barista. You just never know, you know, where people are from. So, again, you know, dropping assumptions for sure. Okay. Questions?
Wonderful. Hi, it's Colleen here. So I just want to open up the line then if you're ready for questions. Thank you so much, Carol and Dina and Michelle. It was fantastic to hear about these learning circles. I think it's truly amazing the work you're doing. There's been some comments in the chat box around some of the challenges you faced and how, you know, some of the, just keep up the amazing work, and just really encouraging words that have come through.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one question, so we're going to invite people to either raise their hands right now to be able to, and we'll unmute your line, or you're welcome to put your questions right in the chat box, and I'll be reading them out. So the first question that came in right now is, each of you as facilitators, what has been the greatest satisfaction doing this work, and what guidance would you give others to support a facilitator's wellness? Great question.
Can I go first?
Mm-hmm.
For me, the greatest satisfaction is actually watching a group of people that walk in, they're going, I don't know why I'm here, I'm really nervous, I don't know what to expect. Watching them go from being closed in and guarded to realizing, like, I can talk about that. It's okay. I can say something that isn't positive, and yet I'm still going to be okay. So watching them, literally, it's like watching them open up and bloom, because even though they've had these, like, quote, negative feelings, they're able to talk about it, and then they gain an understanding through that discussion, and through being able to let go of it, they start to open up to new ideas and new possibilities. And by the end of the session, it's like, wow, these people are amazing. And I compliment them over and over again, because it takes a lot of courage to be able to go in there and almost bare your soul and to show people your true colors. This is who I am. Take it or leave it, but I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to learn. And that's the greatest satisfaction for me.
Mm-hmm. I think that one of my biggest satisfaction in the work, because it can be incredibly challenging around the racism and stigma, it cement barriers for sure. One of the things that we do is go into hospitals and palliative care settings, and we're able to brush and often turn off air conditioners and shut down complete hospital systems to do traditional healing or passing of our people. And I think it is the most rewarding work that we do. It's probably the saddest work, but it is certainly the most rewarding to be able to give back to our communities and go against tradition, which is hospital tradition, when we are faced with so much resistance around air conditioning systems, or the other patients might not like it, or things like that. And yeah, there's fires and this and that, and so we kind of push back a little, and then we try and make it work, and we bring culture and tradition to these spaces that are not typically run in that way, for sure. Yeah.
That answer?
Absolutely. I think you've just really highlighted that, and I think it's really interesting to hear your perspective and some of the things along the way to maintain your own wellness. So one person, Catherine Weed, raised the question, my concern is the one that you raised regarding the training being mandatory, and as a result having staff that are very, very resistant to taking the training. How do you think we can best address this concern or this challenge along the way?
With me, it's just being open that we understand this may not have been your first choice, but we I just thank them for having taken the training and having given the time that they have, because any little bit of learning can make a change, and that is something that people don't really understand until they've actually finished the whole process.
So, and mine is, most folks have chosen a helping profession, so we work in a helping profession. So how we can challenge that we don't want to be culturally inclusive is something that I think folks personally need to look at. But in our jobs, even Excel is mandatory. so I'm often like, okay, so we need to kind of look at why it's challenging for some folks to take it. Now, we have people sitting in our sessions that, will pull out their iPhones or talk during the drumming, and we just kind of pursue and share our knowledge. And I think that if you're willing, you'll learn. And if you're not, that's okay too. It's just not a good time and place for you right now. And so we just do what we can while we're there. How can you best address this? I think it's just like Carol said, if you just share who you are, and that it'll land someplace safe, and if not, that it's just not a good place right now.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and I think it's really interesting to hear that, meeting people where they're at, and also just opening the upfront and open conversation to start the dialogue, and maybe it doesn't move them forward as far as an ideal world, but gets them going in that direction. You're very popular. We've got a question. I know you're probably barely meeting the demands within the Health Authority, but Rick Joe is asking if your team would be interested in doing workshops for school staff, principals, vice principals, teachers, education assistants. And if you're not available, I'd like to invite you to answer the question if you're familiar with anything that's available in the education system.
Well, I think the education system now is taking its own kind of approach to the learning of our history and the reality of our history and the cultural impact. Would we do school staff? I think that it's a stretch. We're in the second largest health authority in Canada. Did I mention there's 20 of us? So, there's only about 5 of us that are going throughout the Fraser Health region to provide this resource. We're certainly available for communication around any questions regarding culture or tradition. Depends on what school you're at. I know that the PHSA is available. I believe it costs $250, but they do give corporate sponsors, so they will give you so many chairs, I guess. So for 100 chairs, it's kind of like a deal that you can access it. So it's usually part of budgets that you can provide cultural safety or cultural training. So I would check out the PHSA because it's quite brilliant. It's anywhere from 8 to 12 hours depending on how much time, and it's all, you're in a cohort. It runs, you have 6 weeks to complete it. There's facilitators. It's really, really good. And then the post-training is free, and I believe there's 3 sessions after that. So I would check out the PHSA first, for sure.
Absolutely, and I did put a link to the ICS training in the chat box. I'll throw it in there again right now so people have access to it. For those who may not have access to ICS for various reasons, whether it becomes a barrier financially, there is, I know, a MOOC, which is a massive open online course that's available as well, and that MOOC is available through the University of Alberta as well, and they have one on Indigenous Canada that's been created. I'll also pop that in the chat box. That may be an option for those who may not be able to participate in ICS who are outside of the health system or perhaps don't have the budget for that, so I'm popping that in the chat box as well. Had a number of questions about, is this a mandatory or is everyone have ICS? So all health authorities in the province have access to Indigenous cultural safety training. This training is actual, and Cheryl Ward would be an expert on this. She will be joining us at a future session, but the session is actually now available in many different provinces across Canada now. They've very much expanded it. So that information is available. In terms of what happens after that ICS training, that's very variable between the health authorities. So Fraser Health, you've shared today today, the amazing work that you're doing in terms of the support and sort of adjunct support to this training. I know that Vanessa Mitchell within Interior Health has sort of some other supportive complementary programs that happen, but in terms of the after support of ICS, would I be incorrect in answering that question? Somebody asked what else is happening, that it appears to be kind of a variable approach across the province in terms of what different health authorities are doing. Is there anything you would add to that question of what else is happening around the province as a follow-up to ICS training?
Well, when you do take the ICS training, you can take the 3 sessions that are the follow-up. So there's bystander to ally, there's unpacking our colonialism, and I've forgotten the 3rd one. But there are, once you've taken that initial training, then you can just sign up for it. You've created a password, and you can access that training. And there's no cohort, and there's no facilitator. It's self-driven, but it's probably like a 4-hour session. But they're quite good too, and they are excellent follow-up training.
Yes.
And they're for everybody that's taken the ICS.
Wonderful. And I just noticed in the chat box, see, we've got so much wisdom on the call, is that there's also an online MOOC now through UBC on reconciliation as well. So I noticed that Lena also shared that in the chat box. So I'm just looking at the time now, and I think we've gathered all the questions that have come in, and I'm just thinking it's perfect time to wrap up our call today. I want to thank you again, Carol, Dina, and Michelle, for trying this new forum, for participating, for being there today. It's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to learn, and I think the work you've shared today has really sparked a lot of food for thought for people on the call of where we can go next and what else can happen to support the amazing ICS training that happens. If anyone missed a question, I really hope I haven't. I think I got all of them in the chat box, but just stick up your hand and I'll try and get to you if I did miss you. Just before we wrap up and hand it back to Virginia, just wanted to share a couple things. Next month we won't be having a webinar because we're going to be in person. So next month we have the Best of Both Worlds, Dimensions of Quality, Indigenous Perspective, which is the big pre-forum conference that will be happening in Vancouver. If you want to learn more about this event, Michelle, maybe I can get you to pop a link into the chat box if you're okay with that. Or I can pop it up after I'm finished speaking and we're doing our closing today. But the Best of Both Worlds will be our conference next month. It's a full-day pre-forum event that we're having in Vancouver, and a lot of the people that have been part of this will be at this event. And so if you can join us in person, it'd be lovely to have you there. So we won't be having an online webinar in March. That will be taking its place. However, in April, we'll be back. So on April 5th, 2017, we have our next webinar, and so the details of this one are still being finalized, so my apologies that we don't have them for you today. We're looking like it's going to be a pretty amazing speaker coming our way to join us, so stay tuned for our announcements and promotion online as things come together. As I mentioned before, we do have a survey that will come out at the end of the session. We really do encourage you to take the time to complete the survey. We read every single result. We compile the results and look at them, and we really want to hear from you about what you want to see in the future. So I want to thank everyone for your time today, and again, acknowledge Carol and Dina and Michelle. It was just wonderful to have you. And if I can be so bold to welcome Virginia back to do our final closing prayer.
Thank you, Colleen. And hands up to Carol, Dina, and Michelle. You did a wonderful presentation today, and the topic is just so near and dear to my heart. You know, that something that is really going strong. You know, I think with First Nations Health Authority now, I'm focusing a lot of attention to how we can really eliminate a lot of the barriers, you know, to who we really are, you know, and we are the culture, we are the land, and we really need to know our language. And so, you know, we just want to say a strong prayer for all of that to happen in our communities. And, you know, and what you are doing there is only a small part of it. And we always say, you know, that if people can come to our community to see us, to hear us, and to feel us, you know, that can just bring so much more meaning to what they're learning, you know, in the style of the training that is going on right there. there's always just so much that can be learned if we can put some experiential training into it as well. You know, it just would really enhance it. So I'd like to say a prayer for all of those who are online today, and say a prayer for the ones who shared from their hearts today, something that would have so much meaning to many people out there, including the ones who weren't able to come on board to be part of it. And thank you, Colleen, you know, for always being there to help to ensure, you know, that all of these things can happen to smoothen the pathway, you know, that we're going, the direction that we're going to try to make things better for our future ACM.
Thank you so much, Jenny. It's just so lovely for you to be able to anchor our session from start to finish. It really makes the difference. I want to thank again our wonderful speakers today, and to all of you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in person in March, possibly, and if not, we'll see you online again in April. And thank you again to everyone for your day, for your blessings, and for sharing this wisdom to help us advance things. Have a lovely day. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.